Nearly a year ago, we did an episode here all about music notation, focusing on a program called Finale. Well, that episode needs a major revision, so we're going to do that next. Hello and welcome to the Musician Toolkit episode number 94. My name is David Lane and it is great to be with you once again. I hope all of you are doing well today. Some of you who may not be doing well over the past month or so are people who have been longtime users of a program called Finale. So we're gonna be speaking to you guys today, and hopefully you will come away with some things that will help you feel a little bit better about what to do going forward. So to help me talk about that today, I have a returning guest. 50 episodes ago, on episode number 44, I chatted with Jason Loffredo in an episode called Conquering Finale and Other Notation Programs. Well, Jason is a Broadway keyboardist and music director. He also performs off-Broadway as well. And we chat more about kind of what it is that he does in that episode. So definitely go, even though a lot of the things we talked about Finale are now going to be obsolete, definitely check out that episode to get a little bit more depth into what it is that Jason does for a living besides being an expert on Finale. So he has a program that we'll talk about that's still out there, and as long as Finale still works, it's a very valuable resource. It's called Conquering Finale. It's an exhaustive set of videos to show you how to use this very complicated program that people have spent a lot of time learning. Some people have had this program since it was released well over 30 years ago. Well, and what has to be the most surprising announcement in the music tech industry that I can remember, definitely in the last several years, Finale announced that they were effective immediately, pretty much, discontinuing any upgrades on their program, and that it would be discontinued entirely within basically a calendar year. Well, this causes a panic because, again, people who've been using this program for a long time, there's two characteristics. One, it's been a very long time since they've had to learn a notation program from scratch. And notation programs, at least in my experience, have about the steepest learning curve of any type of program that I've used. I'm a Finale user, and it took me multiple years before I felt like I had even a remotely efficient workflow. And even like decades later, I was finding things that are new. Well, the other thing that longtime Finale users have are probably, especially if they've been an active composer or an arranger or even an educator who's been putting things together, you have lots of files that can only be read by that program. As is, they cannot be read in Sibelius or Dorico or anything else. So that's the first bit of background that I have to give you. The other thing is that Finale is making it less expensive for a very short time, we don't know how much time, for Finale users, existing Finale users, to get Dorico or Sibelius and for you to transfer your files over. Now, what do you need to do to get those files ready? And also, if you're not a Finale user, I think you could probably check out the previous episode for kind of an overview of notation programs. It might be a little bit more in-depth than what we do here, but you now know that if you're looking at notation programs, the Finale is not a choice. So we are going to talk about, for both Finale users and for both basically newbies who don't have a notation program, you're looking for something new. What do you have to do to get started? What is step one? What is step two? What can help you navigate this post-Finale world and get back on your feet, get back to creating, understanding that there's going to be a learning curve, there's going to be some things that you have to go through. Jason and I chat about all that, and it's my pleasure to share my latest conversation with Jason Loffredo. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of people who need to learn new software now.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And here we are trying to figure out Zoom.
we're trying to figure out Zoom, but also I've been living off of iMovie for so long, but now that I'm making some tracks
Ah,
on YouTube, I'm thinking, well, I need to finally learn Final Cut. Or, my wife has a subscription to Adobe, and I'm trying to figure out if we should upgrade to a sharing
mm,
plan that I learned Premiere,
yeah.
but
I went
eh,
through that same because the Conquering Finale videos I ended up doing all in Final Cut, but I went through that same decision a while back
right,
between Premiere and Final Cut, and I was like, I just don't want to pay the subscription.
right. That sounds like what people may be thinking about Dorico and Sibelius, but
Yeah, I know, I know.
all right, but let's put that down the road again.
Sure.
Anyways, Jason, it's great to have you back on the Musician Toolkit. You're the second repeat guest that I've had, but
Oh,
among all of my podcasts, both of my podcasts, I'm pretty sure you are the first three-peat guest. So congratulations.
oh, wow, that's awesome.
It's good to talk to you today.
You too. Thanks for having me on again.
Okay, so I mentioned in an episode not too long ago, just briefly, the news about finale, and you were previously, I guess it's been about a year since you were on here
Hmm.
chatting about finale, but we also thankfully we talked about other notation programs. I guess I should just summarize the news. So we're not going to get too heavy into what happened with finale. We'll talk a little bit about it, but I would tell viewers, first of all, if you have any interest in music notation programs at all, you should look at the blog and the podcast for scoring notes. There's
Hmm.
very good stuff there, and you had a very nice episode, oh, very detailed and helpful,
Sure.
but while also entertaining in spite of the sad news for a lot of us. Uh, that came out just a few weeks ago. So
Mm.
won't try not to cover too many of the same things there, but I would encourage people to go check that out. But we talked about Finale, we talked about other programs. So Finale is, I mean, it's not the first notation program that you could get, but it was probably the
It's
first one to gain a lot of traction. Would you say?
Yeah, it's the first sort of main commercial product that just everybody was using for a long time. So,
Yeah,
I mean, there was the other programs, Score, I think, and Encore, but they had short-lived lives compared to Finale. But
right.
yeah, they just never really caught on in the same way. But Finale really was the first huge player.
96 through 98, I had a product. I don't know who the company was, but it was called Rhapsody.
Okay,
And
that's vaguely familiar. Yeah,
it was for Windows,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and of course it was the first one I ever had, so I thought it was okay. Going back and looking at the printed scores from those, I'm like, oh
yeah.
man, that was not very good. But honestly, I feel the same way about files I printed off of Finale in 99 and 2000 when I compare them to things that I've done since then. And
Absolutely.
some
The
of it's the
finale,
software, some of it is what some of it is just knowledge of it.
yeah,
So, but
absolutely.
that all said, Finale has made a decision to discontinue their product, and it came very suddenly. So one of the questions that I had, just kind of talking about Finale, did you, before they had made the announcement, was there any point that you suspected this was coming, or do you know anybody who did?
No and no. It did come as a little bit of a surprise. The only sort of somewhat of an indication that I had that maybe something was happening was if you looked at the Make Music website, they have a finale blog, right? And I remember looking at it in like June or July, or maybe even as early as May, and realizing that they hadn't posted anything in months, and I think it was like the last post was like February or something of 2024, and it was May already. I was like, and they had been posting, once or twice a month. It's not super frequent, but it had been several months since they did that. And I was thinking, that's pretty strange. But then I went back in the arc because I was very curious about this, and I was also thinking that it was just about time that Finale 28 should have been coming out. So I went back in the archives and I went back to the year that Finale 27 was released. And I also noticed there was like a 4 month gap in their, or 3 or 4 month gap in their blog post. So I was like, maybe this is like the silence before the release.
It was
So
the
that's
silence before something.
those clearly the silence before something. I did not expect it to be the silence before the demise, but that's unfortunately what ended up happening. So that was really the only indication I had that something was happening. I just didn't know that it was that specifically.
And I know that you have gotten a lot of support already, but for those who have not heard the other interview, you are the creator of a very long, extensive series of videos and tutorials called Conquering Finale. So just want to offer condolences to
Yeah,
you being out of a job as far as that
I
goes.
know. I know. It
But
was I had said that the whole Conquering Finale project, I mean, first of all, it got really, really large. It was like 80 hours worth of videos or something crazy like that. It was a lot of tutorials. But I'd said that it was a pet project,
right,
and in some ways when Finale, when Make Music announced that they're stopping development of Finale, it was like almost like losing a pet.
right. But just kind of like every project you take on, like podcasting has there's a lot of skills I've learned from doing this. So even if I discontinued one or both podcasts, I have that. And I gather from talking to you, well, first of all, you have a job, thanks to your
Yeah,
expertise and notation at NYU, right?
absolutely. I mean, one thing leads to another, right? And it was through having this tutorial series that NYU was looking for somebody to take on their music notation course, and somebody knew somebody that knew me, and they were like, "Why don't you try this guy?" And I was like, "Sure, why not? I'll give it a shot." So yeah, I mean, it did lead to other stuff, and not only that, but it led to other work and other things. So it's not like it was a complete loss, but it was just you know,
Right. But and you also just kind of, as I said with like doing videos and podcasting, you've learned video editing,
yeah,
there's just a lot of skills that you picked up along the way.
exactly. I
So
learned a lot about
anyways,
YouTube too, interestingly, just
yeah.
how the best way to create the videos and post them in a way that will get views and everything, which I'm sure you're learning a little bit about now as well.
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes it's really almost silly things. The one thing I learned not too long ago was, and you may be similar to this. I have things on my computer,
Hmm.
like I would save files for like this will be I have to check. I think it's in episode 94.
Hmm.
So I would previously have saved the video and the thumbnail as MT underscore ep underscore 94. I know what it is.
Hmm.
YouTube, their bots have no idea what that is. But if you say finale notation, or
Yeah,
thing in the file name, YouTube, they call that
they know
meta
what to do with it. Yeah,
what to do with it. So it's just little things like that. I can organize it however I want on my own computer or my own Dropbox. But when I put it on YouTube, I need to change the file name. So,
right, right.
so little little trivia there for anybody doing any kind of posting of anything. So, anyways, condolences on
Well, thank you.
your retirement from that particular endeavor. Um, One thing that I put on my notes, and it became very timely, is that it's important not to update to Sequoia for now, and that
Hmm.
has already been released since as of the time that we're recording this. And Finale pretty much said don't upgrade. Now we're in a lot of the same groups, and I've seen some people say, "Well, I upgraded and it's fine." And I think I saw a comment that you made, like,
Yeah,
but have you really checked it
exactly.
out
Have
yet?"
you checked every single nook and cranny of Finale to make sure that it's fine? Because I don't believe that it's 100% fine until
Right.
a couple months from now, when everybody's saying, "Oh yeah, I've checked everything, it's fine," and then we can start talking. But
Yeah.
you know,
And wouldn't advise that you do that experiment if you're still working with Finale, unless you have it installed on a device that's definitely
yeah,
not going to upgrade. Now, I don't. I have this one computer, so it's like I got to kind of get everything organized before I upgrade to Sequoia. But
right, yeah, and then just when all of this happened, I was keenly aware of the fact that Sequoia was on the horizon. They always released the new Mac OS in September,
mhm,
and they announced this at the end of August, which is also sort of like, why did it's not great timing, guys, to do this
right.
now. right before the new OS, and also right before college classes started. Like that was another huge, like, this is the worst possible time that you could do this. But anyway, knowing that that was going to be the case, I just went out and bought the base level Mac Mini, right?
Hmm.
And just put it had Sonoma pre-installed on it still as of last week, and I just put my second copy of Finale on there. So I have a brand new computer, brand new cheap computer that's going to run Finale for the next hopefully 10, 12, 13, 14 years, depending on,
Nice. Yeah, that's probably not a bad idea to look around, see if can find something like that.
Yeah.
All right, so we are in a, I mean, technically we're in a post-finale world, unless you already own a copy and
Yeah,
look
exactly.
to keep it going. So let's just talk about, whatever you decide to do as far as going forward. What are the top priorities you need to do with your files so that you can convert them to send to another notation program?
Sure. And yeah, I talked about this extensively on the very last video that I made for Conquering Finale. It was a lot about XML conversion or music XML conversion. So you can definitely check out a lot of details there. But I think my general thought about that was, I mean, people are going to have a ton of Finale files on their computer, right? Depending on how long you've had the program. If you've had it as long as I have, I mean, I have Finale files from the early 2000s, a few even from the 90s still. Um, my advice is first of all, don't try to do all of this at once because it's overwhelming and you're just going to get frustrated and all that stuff. But convert to the Music XML whenever you can this year, now, soonish, whenever. But don't worry about importing everything all at once into whatever software that you're going to choose, whether that be Sibelius or Dorico, for a number of reasons. One, again, it's just overwhelming to try and do that. Two, in it's gonna be better when you know the program better. If you learn Dorico for 3 or 4 or 5 months or whatever, and you get really comfortable in it, then when you import the XML, it's going to be a lot easier to figure out what weird things happen and how to fix them and all that stuff. So I would really encourage people not to make converting XML to Dorico their first experience in Dorico or Sibelius for that matter, because that's going to leave you pretty frustrated. You know,
Yeah.
Music XML is not a perfect conversion. There is always going to be some fixing that needs to happen. Some weird things can happen with the setup depending on how it was done in Finale, but how it gets imported into Dorico. So, my advice is learn the program, do some pieces, from scratch in the program for a while before you even try to do that. Again, the other thing is that like how often do you really go back to a file that's 15 years old?
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like maybe once or twice in your lifetime you're going to end up doing that. So there's no need to convert everything. If you have PDFs, and that's the other thing I would suggest is that just make sure that you have PDFs of everything because it's more likely that you'll just want to print a chart from 10 years ago than it is that you're going to have to like completely re-edit it. So that's sort of my main advice about that. And there was one other point I was going to make, which was, oh yeah, so in both Dorico and Sibelius, interestingly, Finale has the most robust music XML system in it because Make Music was the company that was managing music XML for years. And so Dorico and Sibelius, although they do import music XML, they don't actually import all of the data that exists in the music XML file. Finale will actually export more data in the music XML file than Dorico is capable of importing. Same thing with Sibelius. In fact, Sibelius currently right now is still on XML version 3.1, whereas Finale and Dorico are both in version 4.0. But even in Dorico, there's items that it doesn't handle yet. And I have a really strong suspicion that both the developers of Sibelius and Dorico, like I think that they dropped everything that they were doing to improve the music XML import. So I would guess that the very next updates to both of those programs are going to improve the XML importing process. So this again, one more reason not to rush into importing XMLs into your new software, because I think down the road you're going to know the program better and more likely there's going to be more options available on the XML import anyway. So that's my best advice.
So it kind of sounds like maybe top priority is, open your files, proof them as well as you can,
Print to
and
PDF.
print to PDF. And if that's all you do, that's a pretty big win right there. If you
Yeah,
can do
and you can,
XML,
you can absolutely export out of Finale from as XML, because that's not going to change. Finale is not going to change the XML import. Eventually 4.1 is going to come out, but Finale will never have XML 4.1 because they've stopped. The program's paused at 4.0. So yeah, you can definitely go ahead and export as much as you want, but just keep those files on your computer somewhere. Know where they are, and import them when you need them.
yes. Yeah, I heard you mention that on the Scoring Notes interview about like how often do you open 15-year-old files? And
Yeah.
yeah, there's been very few I the only thing for me is I'm very bad about pieces that I'm writing for myself that are not commissioned.
Hmm.
Sometimes they get put aside for paid work, and
Sure.
sometimes I go back and sometimes I forget about them. So I've got like some unfinished, but some are unfinished pieces and some are unfinished transcriptions, I guess, like I've got it
Yeah.
written down on
Yeah.
a paper, but I haven't put them put them all in
Yeah.
Finale, but they're like halfway there. So every now and then I will open those up, and sometimes I've opened them up to change it from an MUS file to an MUSX file.
Right.
Yeah, but
And I will say, Emily Grishman was speaking about this, and someone like her who does all these Broadway shows and everything, and has been doing them for years in Finale, their situation is a little bit different, because they actually might need to go back to some of those old files, because if there's you know, Wicked, for example. Oh, she doesn't do Wicked, but whatever, Wicked.
yeah,
Um, it's that show is still running, but it opened in 2004, so that was on an old version of Finale. All the files are in an old Finale. You can still open them in Finale, but eventually, 5, 10 years down the road, if they need to do something with one of the keys for a singer, they're going to have to figure out how to do that. So for them, yeah, access to those old files is important, but I think to the average user, I don't think it's quite as important.
so let's talk about our post finale world and just what programs we have. One of the things you did on our previous conversation that I thought was very helpful, you mentioned things like, at the time, finale is really, if you're trying to find a notation program for the first time,
Mhm.
finale was great if you were going to do musical theater.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna live in Europe, Sibelius is good, and that you kind of could pick either one if you're doing some film scoring.
Hmm.
You're out in Hollywood, and how Dorico hadn't really kind of like made its name, except that you thought it was pretty good for like concert music, I think.
Right. Yeah.
So kind of 2024 version, maybe 2-minute summaries of the options out there and like who you think the programs would be maybe best suited for if as a number one choice.
Yeah, this is tricky, because an industry like the theater industry, I mean, we're all kind of in like a wait and see what happens, and kind of see what composers are doing what, because, and I think for a while it might just be split between the two programs. So it'll be interesting to see if that actually lands on one or the other, but I don't know. I suspect that it might just kind of be both of them for the foreseeable future. But if you're a Finale user and you're thinking about switching to one or the other, first of all, you can always get the trial versions of both of them. So, try them both out for a week, see which one makes sense. I always say that sometimes this music notation software, like, one of them just clicks in your brain better than the other. So if that happens to be the case, then yeah, pick the one that's going to be easier for you to deal with. Um, but generally speaking, I do find Sibelius is a little bit faster to learn. In some ways, Sibelius is a little bit more flexible, and just being able to just put whatever it is that you want to put on the page without fussing too much, for
Mhm.
better or worse. Um, and also, Sibelius just has a much larger market share right now than Dorico does. I mean, if collaboration is really your main concern, you're going to find a lot more Sibelius users than you are Dorico users. Now that's today. Now that this has all happened with Finale, and Finale was sort of trying to siphon people into Dorico. Who knows? Dorico is going to start making up a lot of ground soon, so that might change eventually.
Right.
Dorico, on the other hand, it's very modern. It's a very slick program. It's got some really, really neat playback capabilities. So if you're a composer and you're really looking for good playback, maybe Dorico's the way to go. Dorico also looks amazing out of the box. Like you open it up, you put music on the page, the music spacing algorithms are gorgeous. The layout is, nearly perfect, just without doing much effort to it. So that's one way to go. The downside to Dorico, in my opinion, is that it is pretty complicated. There's like a million options that you need to deal with if you want to. Um, and I think the learning curve is a little bit steeper with Dorico. So, you know, I never, people ask me if I recommend one over the other. I say, I wouldn't suggest one over the other. I would just say pick the one that makes sense for you, I think.
Right. And I mean, just to kind of give some third party some options, there's a few other programs out there that people still use. Is it Muse Score? Is that one of them?
Yeah,
Or
MuseScore is sort of still a little bit the dark horse in this race, and their development team has been developing very fast. It is a free program, so
Mhm.
there's more users of MuseScore than there is Sibelius. It's just that because it's free, how many of those people are professionals versus amateurs? So it's hard to say what that means in terms of the fact that there's so many people using it. But the one major sort of downside to MuseScore right now is that it doesn't offer as much flexibility in terms of layout and stuff like that as, for what professional copyists certainly need to have. So, for someone like me, MuseScore is not an option right now, but maybe if you're doing very simple things and you just want something to do real quick and you want it to be free, then MuseScore is definitely an option.
Great. One of the things that I think I remember you saying about Dorico, that unlike Finale, Finale, if you're in a 4/4 measure and on beat 40 you put a half note, it's going to give you an error. It's like,
Hmm.
you got too many beats this measure. But Dorico will just go ahead and do a quarter tied to a quarter across the bar line or something like that, just to
Yeah. It's
interpret
a
it.
it's a very different program conceptually. I mean, it almost thinks more durationally, sort of
Mhm.
like a DAW would. You think in terms of this note has a length of 4/8 notes as opposed to this is a half note on beat four. You
Right.
know what I mean? So that note that has a duration of 4/8 notes when it's presented in that measure means that it's a quarter tied to a quarter.
Yeah. So I've been intrigued. So I've been postponing making my decision. So this is going to sound a little bit hypocritical here, but I do get amused when I look online, and just kind of surveying all the reactions. Now,
Hmm.
amused and sympathy. I'm kind of feeling both at once. And some people more than others are going to have probably a harder time. But something that I've noticed, and this is just another example of where I see people who could otherwise be very successful, they struggle with what I think of as decision paralysis.
Hmm.
And there's a great book on the subject. Can't think of the author's name off the top of my head, but the book is called The Paradox of Choice.
Mm.
Great, it's a great book, and it's kind of like sometimes it's hard to make a decision if you have two choices, but when you have three or more, it's like it's almost exponentially worse, when
Hmm.
we're trying to, and sometimes having those choices kind of, we play the what if game so much.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
as I think you or, one of the co-hosts on Scoring Notes, that interview said, you have less of that when you're trying to get a notation program for the first time. It's like,
Hmm.
I don't think now, for a lot of us, when we got into Finale, Sibelius wasn't really an option.
Yeah.
It's like there wasn't a lot of competition, so it was very easy. But then you had Finale or Sibelius,
Hmm.
and you had to kind of weigh pros and cons and make a decision. But I think ultimately, what I try to advise people on is make a decision.
Hmm.
Go ahead and just try something. It's not the end of the world if you have to struggle with it,
Yeah.
or if later on you somehow find that this other program might have suited you better. But as you say, of the two big ones here, Sibelius and Dorico, you can try both and get an idea, and just kind of maybe give yourself, I don't know how long their trials are, but maybe give yourself 2 weeks
Yeah.
Just, set on the calendar decision day
Yeah.
weeks from now, and you don't keep making up, don't delay that. Just go ahead and
Yeah.
say, at this point, I like this better. You might change your mind if you gave yourself 2 more weeks, but time is of the essence, and you want to get on with your life and get on with
Yeah.
doing that. And of course, you may be in a situation where you can keep using Finale, but if you're going to be proactive and get another program, just kind of make that decision is my advice.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing I'd say about that is that, you know, I think the hard thing for especially someone like me, but other people that have been using for Finale for a long time is that it's a little bit of a personal defeat in a way because you've spent so many years, learning this program and mastering this program, and then all of a sudden you have to start from scratch with a new program. So you're getting a huge demotion
Yes.
overnight. You know what I mean? You're going from expert to complete beginner, overnight, which is difficult to swallow. And I get that. And I would just, offer the advice that, you know, give yourself time. Like don't try to don't try to force it. Don't try to become an expert in 3 days. It's not going to happen. You just kind of have to accept the reality and just chip away and chip away. With both of those programs, it's gonna take a while to learn all of the ins and outs of each of them. So, give yourself a break and just kind of take it easy and, chip away at it.
So that leads in nicely to the next thing
Hmm.
that I want to go ahead and say, or that I'd like to go ahead and ask you. So let's talk about how to approach a new piece of complicated software. So you may have to go back in time and think about how you went into Finale, but is there a general kind of mindset or approach that you might kind of give yourself? But I mean, besides like go on YouTube and go on the web and find LinkedIn Learning, whatever, and
Yeah.
find some tutorials, but just to kind of experience it yourself, is there kind of a process that you go through with new programs?
Sure. I always like Emily Grishman's advice about this because she always tells a story about how when she first got Finale back in the whenever that was, the 90s, she said, literally the first thing I did for a couple days or 2 or 3 days or whatever is she opened the program and went through and read every single option in every single menu. She
Hmm.
says, I don't know what this stuff means yet, but I'm just kind of trying to catalog every single option so that, I can start to recognize how things are organized, where I might find one option versus another option. And it's a really, really great piece of advice for learning a piece of software. It's like before you even try to do anything, just look around. You know what I mean? It's so human nature to just kind of open a program and say, put notes in and do this and do that. And it's everything. It's like, yeah, but there's all this stuff everywhere that you can do and read and figure out, you know what I mean? So take the time to just kind of do a little tour around the program, around the menus, around in Dorico, you have 5 different modes that you have to deal with, setup, write, engrave, play, and print mode. I mean, and each of those modes have a different look and a different feel, and they have different options and different menus. So yeah, just take your time and just kind of do a tour. You're not going to understand everything right away, like I said, but eventually you'll kind of start to put pieces together and you say, oh, I needed to do that. Oh, I remember seeing that option. It was over here in this, you know what I mean? So
Yes.
if you can start making those connections, I think that's great. And of course, like you said, the YouTube tutorials I think are great. There's a lot of great learning materials for Dorico specifically, and a bunch of stuff for Sibelius too. So
Yeah, and I've seen in emails Finale starting to like put out some, I guess, recommended videos from their end of like,
yeah, and there's almost like a cottage industry that sprung up overnight with people trying to help transition people from Finale to Doricos.
yes.
But it's been interesting.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard Emily Grishman say that same thing, and you could even further do that if you've got a maybe do a project, a practice project of no real consequence,
Hmm.
and yeah, actually try some of these functions.
Hmm.
Let's see what happens if I do this, just see what some of these actually do, and you may come
Yeah.
up with something cool, and also even find a list of keyboard shortcuts and just print it out, put it nearby where you can have it, and just read through it, and just
Hmm.
if something doesn't make sense, just try to look up what that is. So
And also
Uh,
sometimes another thing I'll do is like, I think I remember doing this when I was first getting into Doricos. I watched a lot of the YouTube videos without actually like using them. You know what I mean? Like it's not like I watched it and then opened Dorico and did it. I just kind of watched it and absorbed as much as I could, so that eventually I got to a thing in Dorico and I was like, I remember seeing somewhere that I could do this. What was that again? Oh yeah, let me go back and find that. You know what I mean? So you're sort of again just cataloging what's possible. You know?
yeah. Oh, I guess one thing I did want to ask about, you mentioned on Dorico. I mean, just to kind of talk about a specific software. I've heard you and others say specific times or many times that you have like these modes, like engraver mode and so forth. Could you give like a brief overview of like what they do, why we would use certain ones?
Sure. So Dorico organized their program sort of like sequentially. You know what I mean? So the first thing you would do when you open the program is you would set up the score, which involves everything related to adding instruments, well, Dorico has this whole system of flows and players and layouts and everything. So that's a whole thing that you have to kind of learn. But that's all done within the setup window or the setup mode. And you can do things like change the staff labels, you can change the instrumentation, change the order of the instrumentation, all types of stuff like that, right? And then the theory is once you're done with that, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to write the music. So then you go into the second mode, which is write mode. And in write mode, literally all you're doing is adding data. I mean, you're adding notes, you're adding markings, you're adding this, you're adding that. You can change a marking from this to that, etc. But what you can't do in write mode is what Dorico considers the engraving features, which would be more like move things around because maybe Dorico didn't put something in exactly the right place, but that's a engraving function, right? There's sort of delineating the two processes in a way, which is completely different than Finale and Sibelius, because in Finale and Sibelius, you're sort of in this one environment and you can add and then move it right away. In Dorico, they're encouraging you to kind of just do all of your writing and then go into the process of engraving, which again, this is one of those areas where people that are coming from Finale for 30 years, we're just so used to like writing and engraving at the same time. And for certain projects, even in Finale, like I've sometimes forced myself to think Dorico like, you know what I mean? So I'll make sure that I get all the writing done first before I go into the engraving. It's sort of, especially if it's a piece of my own, like if I'm doing some orchestration, it just prevents me from getting distracted as a copyist when I'm actually trying to think about the orchestration and the sound of the instruments and all that stuff. So, um, but Dorico's almost they're basically forcing you into that mindset where you're writing and then engraving, and then in engrave mode, you can do all kinds of things with moving items. You can move the staffs if you need to adjust the staffs. You can adjust the note spacing. You can add extra page text. There's a whole area where they have this page templates, which is where you set up the default text and all that stuff. So that's the engrave mode. And then the fourth mode is the play mode. And the play mode is like really, really unique to Dorico. And it's the one area where I haven't spent much time in the program yet, but that's where you can tweak all kinds of settings for sounds. And it's almost like a DAW in a lot of ways. There's a piano roll editor and everything. So there's a lot you can do in the play mode. And I believe any edits that you make don't affect the actual notation. So if you need to offset the timing a little bit of a note, you can do that without actually changing the music notation.
Oh,
And there's other automation things that you can do like you would in a DAW. So that's all done in the play mode. And then there's the print mode, which is pretty simple. That's the last step, obviously, and that's where you can, print or export PDFs or export graphics, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's what the modes are basically. And you can see that they're sequential. It's like you start with this, then this, then this, then this, then that.
Right. I have two more questions. Just kind of maybe just comparing Dorico and Sibelius.
Hmm.
Finale had very good potential for templates, so if you wanted to create, like if I'm doing something for choir and piano, I could set that up,
Hmm.
exactly the way I want it, save it as a template, as an ensemble or whatever, and just go right to that. And so do Sibelius and Dorico both do that well, or is one better at that than the other?
Um, the truthful answer is that I don't know because that was never the way I worked in Finale. Like I
Mm,
know you can save it as a template and then you can access it in the setup wizard and everything. And I believe it's true for both Sibelius and Dorico. But for me, whenever I worked with templates, I would just it's just a file that lives on my computer. So I
mhm.
would create the file, basically empty file with all the instrumentation the way I wanted it, the titles the way I wanted it, even the parts were semi already laid out, like that whole thing. That would just be a file. So if I needed to do something, I would just duplicate the file and rename it and open it.
Right. Okay.
And in some ways that was because I had experimented with trying to include those in wherever you do that and then you open it in the setup wizard. um Certain things, the setup wizard would do certain things to the file that I didn't like, so that's why I sort of abandoned that idea. I don't know if that's the same in Sibelius or Dorico, um but anyway, so I the answer is I think so, but
Sure.
it's not really how I it's not really my workflow anyway.
Well, the way you suggested, you could certainly do that with either one, I'm sure.
Absolutely, sure, exactly.
Um, One thing I never figured out how to do well in Finale, and I may have missed it on one of your videos, but I use a Logic Pro quite a bit. I never felt like I could get an adequate transition from a Finale file to a Logic, so I ended up just playing everything manually in
Mm.
Logic, and I did that. Um, I'm wondering if either Sibelius or Dorico handles that particular thing well, going to a Logic or Pro Tools or some other DAW.
From Logic to the notation or
No,
from the
no,
notation to
from
the
from the notation to the,
oh
yeah.
that's again, I never usually do it that way. I'm usually going the other way. So
Oh,
I'm
okay.
taking something from Logic and importing it into Finale or Dorico or Sibelius. Um,
Okay, well, let's take that too. Is does that work well or better on one?
I mean it excuse me. It works as well as XML works because you can export the score out of Logic as an XML file. Now
Mhm.
there's less types of data in Logic. Like Logic doesn't produce slurs or articulations really. Um, so you're getting more plain data. So you know what I mean? So you can import that into your notation program, but you're gonna actually have to add a lot of stuff, dynamics and slurs and articulations and stuff like that. So um, whenever I do it that way, I would export the XML out of Logic, open that XML file in Finale, and then literally just copy and paste that into whatever template I was working on. And that's exactly what I would do for both Sibelius and Dorico. Going the other way, I think it's similar. Like I've never really tried to do this, but I'm sure it can be done. And you can actually export, I know you can export MIDI out of Finale, and I'm pretty sure you can export MIDI files out of Sibelius and Dorico as well. And then just sort of try to import that into the DAW. But it's apples and oranges in a lot of ways because when you do that, sometimes depending on how your DAW is set up and what sounds you're using, you have to do a lot of manipulations to get it to kind of work the way that you want it to.
Well, this has all been very helpful. So I guess to kind of summarize, kind of like a to-do list for everybody who, well, if you've never used Finale, I mean, congratulations, you have nothing new
you
that you need to
you
do.
you dodged a bullet.
Yeah. But if you're a longtime Finale user, make sure your files are the way you like them, save as PDF, export as uh, music
Music
XML.
XML. Yeah.
XML. Don't be in a hurry to import them. Go ahead and get the trial version of Sibelius and Dorico and give yourself maybe a couple of weeks to make a
Yeah.
decision on one. And then, uh, yeah, I guess if your money's good, go ahead and buy both.
Why not have both?
And then, if Sibelius goes the way of the dodo, or or
Exactly. And
I
especially, Dorico's they're offering that 149 cross grade deal for Finale users too, which is really great. I mean, the program's a $500 or $600 program, so
yeah.
you can do that, and then you can get the Sibelius is also offering the cross grade, so you could do that as well. I mean, I think their offer is $99 for the first 2 years of subscription. So for $249, you can have both programs essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like I said, the one thing this Finale news did for me is I started thinking about everything like, should I actually learn how to make my own website, or is Wix going to be safe? It's like like
I know. It's like you start second guessing, like, what else is going to go away?
That's like I'm pretty sure all my Google Drive stuff and Dropbox stuff is safe, but I mean, the way I described the finale news to my non-musical friends, it's like it's almost like Coca-Cola said, we're no longer making sodas, but we're gonna encourage you to use Dr. Pepper instead.
Yeah,
Pepsi's still around.
that's a pretty good analogy.
Yeah, although none of those products are beneficial for you.
It'd be hard to argue that finale is beneficial for you either.
Yeah, well, that's true. All right. Well, yeah, I know you recently. What kind of projects do you have going on? I think you were recently in California, right? Sacramento, if I
Yeah, I
recall.
was in Sacramento in August doing Jersey Boys. That was the last show of their season, so that was a fun one to do. We had a nice 2 week run at the end of August.
What's next on the horizon?
Well, I'm teaching at NYU right now. Still subbing at Little Shop of Horrors in town, and I've got just a bunch of random gigs coming up. I've got a lot of random copying gigs, so nothing like major, but just a lot of stuff going on. I don't know how it happens. I feel like I never have time to do anything, and
Right. Yeah. Now I know you've already made it clear there will be no slaying Sibelius, demolishing Dorico, no series is like that. But you say that now, and you may get into one of them. You may, who knows?
we'll see. We'll see. Conquering Finale was 25 years of learning that program to the point where I was comfortable enough to actually start that series. And then the series itself was 5 years. It'll be 5 years, November 10th. So I just don't know if I have another 30 years in me to do that with Dorico.
Well,
You
never
never,
say
like you
never.
said, you never know. You never
Yeah,
know.
true.
But
Is there somewhere that people can follow you or find out more about, any projects you have going on or any performances?
yeah, I mean, I have a personal website. It's just jasonloffredo.com. If you're interested in that transition between Finale and Dorico and Sibelius, definitely go check out the very last video I did in the Conquering Finale series. So that's just conqueringfinale.com. That video is posted on the homepage there. I think it'll be helpful for a lot of people trying to make that transition.
Well, excellent. Well, this has been very helpful. So, yeah, thank you for coming back on and chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me on.
And that's going to wrap up episode number 94. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you would please share it. And if you are watching on YouTube, thank you so much. Please click the like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Once again, that's going to wrap things up for this episode, but I'll be back with you again next week.